Good afternoon from Chicago, Illinois, and welcome to Tourist Railroad Connections, More Important Than Ever, Episode 12. My name is Michael Kuehl, and I'm the president of Dynamic Ticket Solutions. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Miller, station manager for the North Shore Scenic Railroad. As the pandemic continues to paralyze the world, and most importantly, everyone here, the tourist railroad industry, more than ever, we need meaningful connections. None of us have the right answers on how to navigate these uncharted waters. No one has ever dreamed of the scenarios that we now face. We're all working in the dark, using our gut instincts to make decisions and try to keep our organizations afloat. Today, Josh and I, along with our panelists, will be furthering the conversation we started in April of this year. We don't have all the answers. We're not claiming to be experts. We are facilitating a dialogue to share ideas and help establish or reestablish connections. We've made available recordings of the past webinars. To access them, simply go to www.dynamicticketsolutions.com and click on the webinars link at the top of the navigation. We would also like to encourage you to participate in the discussion. On your screen, you should have a dialog box labeled Go to Webinar Control Panel. Within that box, there should be two sections. If you look at the bottom section, you should notice a gray bar labeled Questions, and just below that, another white box with the words Type Questions Here. Simply type in your questions and either hit return or send, and we'll do our best to work your questions or comments into our conversation. So let's try and use that a little bit, and let's see if you could indicate whether or not your organization's running. There we go. Josh.
Hi, Mike.
Another webinar. Good.
Yes. Glad to be back here. We've done something like 13 episodes here of our webinar series throughout this year. We took a few months off, and we're glad to be back here with everybody on the broadcast here. A reminder to everybody watching that this webinar series is specifically tailored to you who are watching this. This is the management and the people who run tourist railroads across the country. And we today are going to talk to a couple people who span that country from both sides, and I'm right in the middle here. So I'm Josh Miller again from the North Shore Scenic Railroad in Duluth, Minnesota. So we are in Duluth, and we operate the Christmas City Express Christmas train ride that will not be running this year. So we are shut down, as many are, and the museum, the Lake Superior Railroad Museum we're attached to, is also currently closed down. So have some time here to meet with Mike and our other distinguished guests here that we'll get to in just a little bit. We have Nathaniel Guest from the Colebrookdale Railroad, and we also have Eric Mason, the interim CEO of the Cumbres Toltec. So we have some great guests here that I'm looking forward to talking to both of you. Before we get to that though, everybody who is watching, just a reminder that Mike already mentioned is to use that question box. Go ahead and use that question box. Should be renamed as, you can leave comments there too, and just let us know, are you running or not? Are you operating trains, or are you completely shut down? Are you at home right now? Are you sitting in an office, fortunate enough to still be working or not? Things like that. So feel free to share that information with us, because we want to make this as interactive as possible for you to interact with us, talk about what you're doing, ask questions. The whole idea of this is to network with other people who do what you do. And we thank Dynamic Ticket Solutions for putting it together, and glad to be here today. So let's get on to our guests here today. We have Nathaniel Guest and Eric Mason. Eric, we're going to start with you. Just tell us a little bit about just what you do at the Cumbres Toltec, kind of your current status for the operation, and we'll go get into the conversation from there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me today. I'm looking forward to seeing many more people from the industry. I'm serving as the interim CEO for the Cumbres Toltec. The immediate predecessor, John Bush, retired recently, and he announced that. So I'm in for the organization, helping the team look at ways of enhancing the future experience for our guests, looking at different historic preservation projects that we can pursue to continue our mission of preserving that really important history, and really just working with the team to kind of navigate the organization. We are currently not operating for the off season. We also have chosen not to operate for the Christmas season, primarily for the obvious reasons of COVID. and the restrictions of both states that we operate in, which is New Mexico and Colorado. That is generally what I'm up to, and that's who I am. My background is more in tourism, organizational management, and really helping organizations, optimize themselves and really talk to consumers to find out what really motivates and interests them, and find a way to bring a solution and a better experience to them.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you're bringing a lot of great experience to the Cumbres and Toltec. Well, meanwhile, you also have some very big shoes to fill. I'm sure you probably already know that, of course, as well. The Cumbres and Toltec itself is one of those bucket list railroads for everyone in the industry, as you have to ride that railroad someday in your life, and if not multiple times, which hopefully you get some experience doing. So, turning it over to Nathaniel Guest, another a bucket list railroad, of course, too, is the Colebrookdale Railroad, a very ambitious group. And Nathaniel, you're here with us, as the executive director, in a beautiful location there, sitting inside the train. That is not a virtual background. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation as it's going on right now.
Thank you, Josh. My name is Nathaniel Guest, as you said. I'm the executive director of the Colebrookdale Railroad Preservation Trust. And I need to ask, can you hear me okay? We just had this crew is working on the internet lines as we speak that just arrived as we started our meeting. So I'm hoping they don't cut the wrong thing. And if they do, then you know what happened. So, so we are a unique organization, that we're a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that runs the Colebrookdale Railroad. And there's a subsidiary for-profit organization that runs the freight services that we do here. Freight has continued from the beginning of the year unimpeded. Passenger has not. And so we came back to life in October, running passenger trains, and ran under our state guidelines of 50% capacity, social distancing, masks on board, regularized cleaning, up until just about an hour ago, when the governor just announced some new restrictions. And we're not sure yet how to interpret those restrictions. We fall into multiple categories: dining, entertainment, history museum, recreation, and so depending upon however we're a small business, so depending upon however we seek to class ourselves, we've now had new restrictions posed upon us. Our work as a railroad has been sort of bifurcated in that way: freight and passenger operating, if and to the extent that the state requires. Our work as a nonprofit has actually increased. So the grant writing that we do, our appeals to donors after the requisite time period, where it would be early on in the pandemic, it would have simply been inappropriate to be fundraising when there was so much need for direct support to those persons and entities that are providing relief during the pandemic. Now, as we're entering towards the close of the year, we're beginning to reach out to our base and say, look, even though we've faced with these challenges, we were able to do all of these things, even in the face of those challenges, but yet now we're going to need your help. And so as the passenger operation has scaled back, the work of the nonprofit to make sure that there's a passenger operation next year has increased. So probably a long, broad answer to your question, but we've been very active on all the fronts that we could.
So as of this very moment, you are planning to continue operating your holiday trains?
As of 5:09 p.m. Eastern time, yes, there will be a meeting of our board of directors, no doubt, early tomorrow morning to review, and I'll be reaching out to our compatriots in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who do tourist passenger services, and if we can't get any good guidance from the state, which I suspect will not be forthcoming soon enough to be helpful for this weekend's passenger trains, we at least need to be in lockstep as an industry as to what we're doing, so as to protect ourselves.
Well, and as we have discussed with you before, right here on this webinar, is that the railroads across the country, tourist railroads across the country, are struggling to identify as what label are you and what label do you want to be, because we are so many things that do span multiple different definitions. As you mentioned, restaurants and tourist attractions and entertainment and shows, and especially when it comes to holiday trains, there's the show element of the the Christmas train. Now you are Nathaniel. I'm going to stick with you though here. I mean, you are slated to be running that train with people on it. Is that tomorrow night or is it Saturday?
Tomorrow night. Yeah, the next train goes out at 6 p.m. tomorrow.
Interesting. So there'll be some immediate notifications going out one way or the other there tomorrow.
It won't surprise you to know, as we sit here, my telephone is ringing with passengers and board members all wanting to know what my interpretation of what the governor's thoughts are.
Sure. Well, we definitely thank you for your time here. And I got to give you credit for giving up your personal cell phone number to passengers. But
I think everybody has it.
Doesn't everybody do that? Okay. All right. Back to Eric here now. Cumbres and Toltec, where have you guys fit into, things as you're currently shut down, not operating excursions? What's going on there? To assure that funds are still coming in and that you'll have a next year or a year after?
Yeah, well, the guest operations are shut down. By no stretch are things shut down. We are super busy on both of our shops, both on the New Mexico side and the Antonito, Colorado side, busy doing the work that we typically do every off season, is preparing for the next season. So we've got lots of locomotive work and guest car work going on, doing some refurbishments. We're still very active in our restoration work as well. So there's a few different projects underway there. As you know, Staffy has just kicked off in earnest the Paycar F project, which is being helped sponsored by History Colorado and other private donors to help bring that car back to life. So from the activities perspective, yes, the guest side is certainly wound down for the season. The back of the house or shop side is just waking up. As a matter of fact, I just jumped off a call to jump onto this call with Marvin and Staffy and Avery and the guys down there, just talking about sort of the progress that we're making and the next steps that we're taking on some of that side. Really, the way we're looking at, not that we've kind of gone there yet, is we want to be prepared for what we're hoping for is a bright season next year. So we're plugging along just like we're going to open up, and we have published a schedule for next season, and it's going to reflect some of the precautions that were taken, with the introduction of COVID this year, some of the learnings that we took away, but we're trying to build some flexibility into being able to scale that out, meaning more, if COVID circumstances improve. So there's a lot of planning that's going on in addition to the locomotive and restore work, even on the business side, to make sure that we're prepared to take advantage of what we're hoping to be a much brighter season.
So it sounds like you've been able to keep people employed and operating there.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we too fall, in the category of at the will of the governor of the states that we operate in. So, New Mexico, they have their policies and guidance that we follow. As Colorado, that changes based on the fluctuations in COVID cases, hospital situations. We've just more recently been able to occupy again the station and the shop in Chama. 2 weeks ago, that wasn't the case because of the case increases. And Antonito, it's sort of TBD right now. Right now, we're not operating in the red zone. We're one level down, so we can occupy the shop space as we normally would. We are also fortunate that we've got space that we can spread out. So even within the shops are big, and there's different rooms within the shop. So even if we get in the worst case scenario, let's use Chama as the example. There's a couple of different rooms where the crew can continue to work safely, and
Sure.
We're certainly practicing all the protocols that are suggested, and we're making sure that we're doing that with masks and cleaning and distancing all at the same time.
Excellent. I have found as we go into the holiday season here, we moved and we're going to do a live webcast of our Christmas City Express story. We're going to do a live webcast about 45 minutes long or so, but the show itself is about 12 minutes, which we're pre-canning to be kind of as live, so we could do a little production work with it. And we're pretty excited about it, and I could not believe the response. It is free. However, I have found that the fundraising element of it, in terms of, there's an option to donate and there's an option to buy the book or the bears or whatever. I got the little bears right there. I found that people are really excited to support. and finding any way they can to throw money at various things, because there's options there for people to donate to projects and such. And people who I kind of know through the years that aren't necessarily trained people are donating to some stuff that I wouldn't have expected them to. This is a question for both of you, but I can start with Nathaniel, because you mentioned you're doing some fundraising and turning and doing an ask. Would you say that people are being very generous right now, even considering, you know, economy troubles? Some people are furloughed or laid off. It seems that people out there are able to help and support and donate to railroads.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the virus has given given folks a reason to understand why an industry which can sometimes be difficult to fund anyway, but yet is a meaningful one and is an important part of quality of life and creating memories and an important part of the economy of the places that we serve. Why giving to an organization like this is even more important now than it might have been in the past. That we do well and we do good, but at the same time, we are not allowed to do what we normally would. And so therefore, that gift that they give isn't just doing something that's nice, it's preserving something that is a critical part of the communities over time. And so when we put an appeal out, you know, typically at the end of the year, we put an appeal out to say, you know, we've got these great projects that we accomplished this year. These are the projects that we want to accomplish next year, and look at these great memories that we made. And you typically want to avoid a discussion of the fact that, hey, there's existential questions going on here. And generally, you know, that's not something that a nonprofit wants to talk about, if in fact it's the case. And, you know, for many of us, if we have a bad season, that can be true. Now it makes sense, at least in my estimation, and for the donors that I've talked about, that, yeah, now we can talk about it. If we don't have a good year this year, there's a big question mark about what happens next year. And that's not something that you want to try to hide. And so we're being very forthright that we've done a lot of great work. A lot of great things have happened this year. We're very excited about the projects coming next year. But we're not just going to ask for funding support for those particular projects that we're excited about. We're going to ask for funding support to keep the organization going and to keep that momentum moving forward. And that dollar that you might give is going to do a whole lot more than what it might have otherwise have done. So people are expecting that, at least as we've seen, and our donors have been very forthright in asking questions about how are you doing, or what do we have to take, what do we have to do to make sure that the railroad will be here next year, that you don't lay people off, and that you know, the momentum keeps moving forward. And of course, the projects that we've been working on are also on their mind. They don't want to see those projects end. So that's the appeal to our donor base. It's a completely different cast than what we've done before. And again, I'm coming at from the perspective that we're a startup, and so that in the first few years of startup, there's always existential questions, you know, and that's probably not the case for some of the more mature organizations that are participating in this call. But we don't talk about that generally. We talk about the progress and then the exciting things moving forward. Again, this year it's a little bit different. But it is a focus on 2021. People know that 2020 has been a year that we will always remember and never want to repeat. And so we look at, yes, we've got to get over this hurdle. With your help, we can get over this hurdle. These are the great things we're looking forward to in 2021. So that's been the message to the donor base. Our passengers, by and large, when we've had to pose questions or answer questions that they pose to us about, well, what if the restrictions come in and we can't ride the train, or we just don't feel comfortable riding the train? A much greater percentage of those persons than ever before say, listen, just keep that ticket purchase price as a donation to the railroad. We want to see it survive, and we'll be back next year, or we'll be back when we think things are safe. That's not something we ever would have asked for, and the willingness of our passengers to do that is indicative of the fact that people who care about the work that we all do here and show that support by riding the train, also understanding that the particular circumstance of 2020 means that investment, refunding that money would have a disproportionately negative impact on our enterprise. And so we certainly appreciate that. Similarly, we've also been able to ask for some or even receive some indulgences that haven't been asked for from elected officials and other persons with to whom we owe obligations. So funders, lenders, insurance companies, even the FRA has been understanding and provided some additional grace during the course of this year that I don't think is necessarily within their within the general behavior of those entities. So.
Sure. Eric, have you found a generosity level difference in some of your contributors?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and as a matter of fact, we were just talking about this yesterday with the business ops team. There's been certainly an increase in those donations, contributions. Certainly from the public's perspective, we've also had positive conversations with some of the traditional organizations, donors, foundations that typically fund. We do, as many do, receive some funding from states for capital projects and so forth. Given what the states have gone through, there has been a question mark on what that funding would look like, given the hit that some of these states have taken. That's
Sure.
Yes, that's certainly not been solidified, or because I think all states are sort of still trying to evaluate what happened and what impact it's taken on them. But we continue to have those discussions actively. And we've done a couple of things just in terms of pre-sales to try to get revenue in the door, to ensure we've got revenue in the books to open next season. COVID's hit hard, and I totally understand and hear you, Nathaniel, on making sure that we've got the ability to kind of carry on and open up next year and bring the team back and carry together. So we did receive a very good response in terms of our pre-sale Cyber Monday, Black Friday kind of event. We've also continued to see inbound inquiries through our website, asking for schedule updates and things like that. We also had some generous ticket holders, not necessarily just give up their ticket, but certainly willing to show flexibility on, I'll just take a trip another time, and we've carried over some of those. And that just wasn't in the individual ticket holder side, that's even groups and charters. So that was very optimistic, and that allowed us to have some unearned income on the books that will obviously convert once they come back and ride the train. But yeah,
Sure.
we're faced with the same sort of exercise.
I understand. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you
for a moment on something Eric mentioned, that for those of the organizations who are participating on the call that are nonprofits that do a lot of fundraising from grants and donations. Just as Eric mentioned, we're seeing Pennsylvania. We're in Pennsylvania. We're seeing a lot of the funds that we typically go towards being decimated at the state level. So going for state money that isn't federal money metered down to the states is not going to be a principal funding strategy for next year. So private donations, private foundation grants, and also federal funding has been a shift of our fundraising scheme for next year. So we've been spooling up to find some additional help to navigate through grants.gov and the catalog of federal domestic assistance.
Good suggestions, actually. Finding new revenue sources is all key, especially when it's going to become time to start up and the cash flow needed to just stock the gift shop shelves and so on. We've had some additional attendees join us here on our Tourist Railroad Connections, More Important Than Ever, episode 13. And thank you so much for joining us today. We are sitting here talking with Eric Mason, the interim CEO of the Cumbres and Toltec, and Nathaniel Guest, who's the executive director at the Colebrookdale Railroad. And we've got plenty of time here to continue on, but we do want to take in some questions from our audience and hear from you who are watching, those who run the railroads, that the excursion railroads throughout the country. And we want to also hear from you what your thoughts are. What do you think about the generosity of your base right now and the public in general in terms of their contributions to you and donations and projects and things like that. I'm going to turn to Mike here to see if you have any questions for our panelists from the audience.
We haven't so far, but I think we ought to continue this conversation. I think we hit on something here as to you're obviously looking for new ways to kind of, I guess the technical term is pivot, how people or railroads are pivoting. So I'd be curious to ask everyone to use the chat box if you could tell us how you're pivoting. What are you doing differently from the last few years to now to try and keep your brand in front of your guests and to your constituents, I guess? And we did get one interesting comment when people registered. Brooklyn Zayek from the Toronto Railway Museum mentioned that they're planning on doing more virtual events, holiday model train show on December 12th, a virtual lecture series, and trackside gift shop pickup. So I think that there's a lot of creativity there that we could talk about as well. So please let us know what you're doing in the questions box.
Sure, that's some cool ideas too. As we've talked about in our previous episodes, which by the way are available on Dynamic Ticket Solutions website. As we've talked about before, it will be interesting some of the things that have come out of the pandemic in the railroad and railroad museum world that will continue on in the future. Will we continue doing virtual lectures and things like that? I know that here in Duluth, Minnesota, we've had a great reach to a new YouTube base. We became, influencers, if you will, and got monetized and all that from YouTube. And that's all based on the number of views that you have. And we found there are people all over the country. I've gotten emails from as far away as Australia going, we love your daily video tours that you guys do. And now there's people there experiencing the museum that they may never have even come to. Duluth, Minnesota isn't exactly on the standard trade routes, but so that will be the interesting thing that comes out of it. Let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you're doing as it relates to holidays that you haven't done before, and to find maybe that new base, new audience, reach out to different people that are out there, and some of the stuff that you maybe are even in the planning works of. Do you want to take that one first there, Nathaniel?
Sure. So this year, for the holidays, we changed our own experience to be able to try to find a COVID responsible way of offering a Santa experience. And then we broadened the kind of activities that we were doing back at our station so as to help fulfill our community and economic development mission to our communities. So in the first vein, we took a flat car and transformed it into a Candyland car and put Santa Claus in a gingerbread house. And so that interaction that happens between Santa and the children happens outside with the breeze of the train at a social distance at 6 feet, so the children can approach Santa. Santa actually has a microphone so he can interact with them without having to get up close and personal. And so we escort each family through the train to meet with Santa. And so we keep our speed reduced to make the passing through the cars a little easier. Train doesn't go quite as far. The train ride's a little shorter. That affords us a little more time at the station to clean the train. We've always relied heavily on volunteers, but in many ways, 2020 is more like our startup year than it was like the year before it in terms of our reliance on volunteers to do many, many things so as to help us keep our costs down. So among those, when we get back to the station, a team of volunteers climbs on the train and cleans it stem to stern. The pricing of a deep cleaning from professional sources would have precluded being able to operate at a 50% revenue capacity. Back at our Boyertown end, particularly, we've worked with the two business organizations and the Main Street organization that are active in Boyertown to transform the yard area into a place that showcases local restaurants and local businesses. And so we ran a Chris Kindle Mart several weekends. So it was an outdoor area that took over most of our parking area, but again, at 50% capacity, we had a lot of parking area left over. So it really didn't benefit the railroad much. I think it from a financial standpoint, didn't benefit us at all, but it gave the passengers something else to do and enjoy while they were here. And it also gave the businesses a way of getting a boost from the passengers who were coming, because they had a satellite facility for those weekends right here at the very place where those visitors were arriving to Boyertown. We've also hosted a number of fundraisers for local food pantries and places providing support to first responders and healthcare workers, and made a commitment to provide some free train rides to them and their families at a time when they can enjoy them. Presumably that will be sometime next year. And lastly, we've been trying to advertise the fact that there is a Santa experience here that's done in a reasonably COVID responsible way, so that folks will come to Boyertown and they wouldn't otherwise necessarily come here, because there's fewer Santa opportunities than there are other places. I think that pretty much summarizes what we've done a little differently for this season.
Sure. Eric, some things that you maybe are doing that you haven't done before, that kind of good that came out of the COVID discussions and meetings and all that stuff that we have to do, the Zoom calls.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not able to do the holiday trains this year, but I think in retrospect and in reflection back on historical ways that we've done them, I think we've all got a renewed sense of urgency on providing more access during the holiday season, not just this holiday, but many holidays that perhaps maybe the Cumbres and Toltec hasn't necessarily presented options for. So I think that we want to remain a positive force, and we will, clearly, on the communities that support us. I think generally and historically, the holiday trains were for that, to show appreciation for the communities, to allow families to come out. We want to do more of that, and we also want to blend that with incremental revenue opportunities to help support the railroad, because every dollar that we can take in is really just turned around to help make sure that railroad's there for future generations.
And which is what many of us do. And it's the part of being the nonprofit. It really is just going right back into the firebox, if you will. Turning back over to Mike here from Dynamic Ticket Solutions, our host, and online questions.
We had a couple of comments that I think are very germane. Tom Hutchinson from the New Hope Valley Railway said, instead of having Santa walking the train as before, we built a big Santa sled outdoors. Santa sits up high on the sled with a face shield, and the families sit low in front, about 6 feet apart, with their backs to Santa, and they can take a picture. And then Greg Matthews from the Kentucky Railway Museum has mentioned the museum is surviving, but only at 50% level, but increased revenue on car storage. Going into 2021, we're partnering with a new distillery being built on the track that will create new destinations and unique experience that are both for both the distillery and the family venue. Log Still Distillery with Dant family of I.W. Dant whiskey from the 1800s.
So, sounds like a really great idea. I think kids love whiskey and whiskey trains. For the dads, anyway. For the dads. The good times there. You make everybody happy, huh? This is a great time to pivot to some of the exciting things that are coming in the plans for next year. I know that across the country, you can't miss the news that there's a little bit of optimism, of course, with vaccines and things like that. What kind of ways have you adjusted your planning for next year to be responsive for both kind of the two different ways or multiple paths that the future could hold? Generally, we're able to do, that 10% increase in business or 3%, 5% increase in business and recombobulate our budget, throw in a couple requests for some new computers or whatever, and there's our new budget and operating plan for next year. However, this is a different world, and we don't know the path that things will go. What kinds of things are you looking at into that crystal ball for the coming operating season? We'll start with Eric.
Yeah, well, I mean, this coming operating season, what we did is, as many of you probably know, we were set to do a lot of celebration this past season for the 50th anniversary. Right. That's now been pushed into the next season. So there are a bunch of things happening and a lot of exciting opportunities to experience different sort of locomotives and just general themes and experiences and photo opportunities of the equipment that we're bringing to bear throughout the season. But let me just get to the point of how do we plan for maybe a diverse and maybe a bit of unknown season as well. Part of it is we obviously we also had to practice social distancing, so we're also trying to assemble, which we had partially done previously. We're trying to finish some extra guest cars, so we have more capacity, put more cars on. We're trying to bring some of the locomotives that have been going through service back online, so we have more capacity to pull more. We've introduced some shorter train routes as well. So we're sort of starting to try to make sure that we've got a broader product set. So those that may be concerned from the COVID perspective on being on a car for 6 or 7 hours, we're trying to present an opportunity to make it maybe a 2.5 hour experience,
Sure.
which in theory helps limit their time out there, so to speak. But we have the ability to really open cars, open the windows of the cars to make sure that there's airflow flowing through. We've got the open observatory cars. So that's been very positive, and we've seen quite a few people sort of cycle through those. But really, at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure we have the capacity, in addition to catering to all the events that we've got planned for this coming season, which there are many. So I think in the future, diversifying revenue opportunities to help support the railroad will be things like, incremental theme trains, like dinner trains, and maybe concert, kind of opportunities. Like I mentioned before, taking advantage of more holidays, whether that be, holidays throughout the year, Halloween, for example, and others that we can likely create train experiences for. In addition to other things, people want to get out. It's a long stretch of track we've got, 64 miles. So, some people have asked about, well, can we catch a ride and camp and then catch a ride back? And can we fish? And can we bike? And can we race the train on a parallel track from an endurance perspective? So we're looking at all kinds of stuff that might be options that help diversify our product offering. And at the same time, given the nature of our environment, it allows people to sort of space out in terms of distancing and sort of accommodates some of the requirements of COVID.
Interesting. Sounds like you do have definitely some ideas in the box, and as your audience is also starting to think outside of the box too. If there was an annual award show for excursion railroads, and there was a railroad that was always coming up with new stuff, I would have to turn over to the Colebrookdale Railroad, where that's your next question. What kinds of new things are you guys coming up with as you look forward into 2021?
Well, I don't know that I would start out with our principal activity necessarily being new, but we're starting with some basic assumptions as to how to get from here to there, and defining there as whenever a vaccine or other intervention allows us to go back to 100%. Because 50% is not a winning business strategy for this enterprise or many others. So, we started with an assumption. Let's hope this is the worst case scenario, that we're looking at sometime in third quarter 2021 to return to 100% capacity. So then that means that whatever activities that we engage in up until that time have to be profitable, or at least break even at a 50% rate. What we experienced this year when we were operating, again, we didn't start operating until October, which is traditionally the start of our busy season, is that at a 50% rate, there were enough people to fill those trains, again, at 50% capacity, just from the natural demand, even in spite of the virus. And the same thing is held through up until the present moment for 2020. The first 9 months of any given year are generally the slow period, but for, as Eric mentioned, holidays. And so in some ways, the virus has just kind of forced us to go in the direction we were going anyway, to make sure that we've got more capacity, more revenue generating capabilities during those seasons when the demand is there. That demand now having to only rise to a 50% level, but also at the same time overcome the built-in hurdles of people, not wanting to ride because of the virus or what have you, or other restrictions put on by the state, so on and so forth. Because of the, and I imagine this is true in many places represented by the folks on this call, restaurants have particularly suffered, event venues have particularly suffered. So we're finding many new opportunities to partner with those industries at rates and in ways in which they would not have considered before. And so the idea of being able to hold an outdoor event for Mother's Day tea is something that I had posed years ago, and then, my gosh, by the time we got done with what the caterers needed, we would never been able to do it. This year, we're already planning it. That's just by way of example. So we're never going to be able to hold the 200 people on board our train that we otherwise would, but if we have an event venue 2 miles down the route, we can run shorter trains more frequently and reach the same number of persons at an outdoor event. So we've morphed things a little bit. It will be a learning experience that may inform the world post-fires, but certainly some of the things that we're doing in order to make it work are not going to be things that we'll repeat in their entirety when we don't have to anymore. I will say that there seems to be a general consensus that there's a build-up demand, that because of this, there's a great volume of people who are dying to get on tourist trains. And we're all excited about that. Whether it's true or not, who knows, but let's hope so. And so, we're looking at the third quarter of next year and fourth quarter as being a bang-up time of the sort that we've not seen before. And so in some ways, we're kind of holding our powder so that, we can make up for whatever disappointments 2020 first three quarters might be with a really spectacular fourth quarter 2021. So that goes everywhere from trying to finish some of the capital projects that make a better quality experience or can increase our capacity, getting those done in 2021, which is also a way of bringing in revenue for those capital projects, which is also a way of helping to fund some the folks who work for the organization. So we're going to focus on capital projects and do what we can with the operation during the first 3 quarters of next year. But as a nonprofit, we typically rely on donations and grants and so on and so forth. We're now branching into seeing if there's some ways to be able to have a run alongside for-profit, which is sort of the opposite scheme from what most people do. That enables private investors to take advantage of the 100% depreciation on some assets, so as to be able to acquire some new equipment to increase our capacity, even if we have it for just a short period of time. So we got to be creative. We don't have a lot of money to just go out and buy new equipment, and there isn't a lot of ready to run 19 teens passenger cars, and so we kind of have to be improvised. But I think for all of us, to the extent that we can find ways to have more equipment, more capacity, fourth quarter next year, if there is that bump up that all of the hospitality and recreational purveyors are feeling that there might be, it could be a very good year for us fourth quarter next year.
Well, I think you hit on an interesting question, Mark. I would agree with you that there does seem to be a pent-up demand. I think we spent a lot of time in Duluth anyway, turning people away. We saved a ton of money on marketing this year because we didn't have to do much, because people were just talking about looking to do stuff after the quarantine. Obviously, it is likely that next year we'll have that continued demand that is out there with a limited supply in terms of capacity that we can do. If you're an investor, and let's just say we have 1 million investors knocking on our door, is now the time to invest in additional equipment, expanding your railroad, the Kevin O'Leary, pour gas on it so it ignites and grows really quickly? Or is this a time to be cautious, is the question?
Good question. I think that we've never experienced anything quite like this, but I mean, if you with the pandemic generated impact on our industry, but there have been things that are roughly analogous in terms of how they've impacted the tourism industry. And I think from an investor standpoint, looking at the long term, I think there's an argument to be made that this is a time to invest, as long as those investments are reasonably titrated to the return they might make. So, if you were to say to an investor, yeah, let's go out and let's buy some passenger equipment and put $4 million into a car, well, it's going to be hard to think you're going to get that back. But if you can put some reasonable amount in, then you have that asset that you can handle over time. But I think it also depends to find the right investor.
Absolutely. Now, Eric, you're also a location that's always adding more, additional cars. And you've got 1,000 train cars out there, I think, in Antonito. What do you think about? Is it time to be investing in that and growing that business? I don't want to say recklessly, but exponentially more than you normally would.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're continuing our track of sort of restoration and refurbishment. We had quite a pipeline built before, so to sort of fathom increasing that pipeline is sort of hard to fathom because to Nathaniel's point, there's only so many pieces of equipment out there. But we have had discussions with some of our foundation supporters about potentially adding more sort of gas to the fire to accelerate some of the completion efforts. Mm-hmm. And we're going to pursue those conversations. We like everybody else have limited, not just financial resources, we have limited human resources. So even if the capital came through, there's not many people walking around the planet that really have the skills and expertise to really help kind of get these things over the finish line. So I think it's really a delicate balance, but we're going to continue to do the things that we committed to do. And if we get some incremental capital to maybe accelerate where possible, we'll certainly do that. We've got a lot of equipment coming online that's been worked on for a number of years. That we had the 168 come out, a few months ago. That'll start running, and I'm bringing not a different viewpoint, but maybe a renewed viewpoint of as we invest in the restoration of this equipment, we definitely need to keep an eye on how to allow itself to pay for itself to keep updated and maintained. So we also want to make sure that this equipment is accessible to the public because it's really important to build awareness and grow affinity and to build generations of tradition. And I'd like to see us do more of how we position our equipment when it's not being run. So how it can be more accessible to the public and come and touch and feel and to get a dose of it prior to even getting on the train or getting off the train.
That's a great question and a really good one to discuss. I feel like we could almost do a webinar about that. I think a lot of our trains spend a lot of time locked and closed down. I'm going to turn though to Mike here. We've got about 15 minutes left here in our webinar series. We're talking with Nathaniel Guest from the Colebrookdale and Eric Mason from the Cumbres and Toltec Excursion Railroads, and I'm Josh in Duluth. Back over to Mike here with some questions and comments from our audience that go right along with our discussion here.
Right, so there's quite a few, so please just bear with me. Scott McGee mentioned, we've noticed a very unusual concept this season where less is encouraging more. A train at 50% capacity sells out, which forces the next train to sell out. And we have seen more ridership due to this concept. And he also added, we've added additional trains where we normally don't run trains before. Roger Stroop from, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Roger, from the South Carolina Railroad Museum commented, this summer we sold our cabooses at one price for up to 10 people to ride, comfortably ride in. Did this for Halloween and Santa, and they sell out quickly. Passengers know that they'll be isolated in their own spaces.
For sure, and I saw some nods there from both of our guests here. I think we all kind of do a similar caboose, buy a whole train car kind of a concept, I think, a little bit. Yeah, excellent. Mike?
Yeah. And then Randy Gustafson commented, the HRA news that there's a blanket docket that has been filed with the FRA to extend the 15-year deadline on steam boilers if the locomotives was out of service during 2020 due to COVID. Stay tuned.
Interesting. Now that is a little bit of breaking news, I guess, at least for me, because we of course discussed that with our steam engine as well, and we all have this 15-year magic thing that we're supposed to rebuild them after 15 years and so on. And then anytime you burn months or years is never fun because that deadline doesn't change normally. But it's interesting that maybe there is kind of a blanket update coming. Eric, do you know anything about this? I know you guys are all steam.
Not an extension. I had some discussions regarding the FRA earlier this week. That did not come up, but that would be welcome news.
Yeah, sure would. Especially because that was the first thing to go. I think when we were starting to cut and slash was no steam engine this year, and it turned to diesel, and then Thomas and so on. Any other questions here from the audience there, Mike?
Greg Matthews also added the Kentucky Railroad Museum is taking the next 6 months to upgrade equipment and other amenities before the new distillery and family venue. Event space for 350 B&B, lake trails, amphitheater, and more coming online and expected to be a big third and fourth quarter of 2021.
It sounds like there are investments and a lot of optimism, I think. one of my lines throughout life has always been that Minnesota, and specifically Duluth, Minnesota summers are so good that it makes winter worthwhile. Similarly, I think that one of the great things that comes out of COVID, hopefully, is that we definitely appreciate our quote unquote normal world a little bit more when and if we ever get back to it.
For sure.
Nathaniel, any updates throughout with your breaking news on the Colebrookdale? You guys are meeting tomorrow morning, I'm sure.
I guess we'll be deciding tomorrow what we're going to do. So it's an ongoing saga. So.
Sure. Let's quickly talk about like how technology has helped a little bit with holiday train planning and/or how you will handle cancellations, reservations, moving, fundraising, all of that stuff. You know, specifically maybe with dynamic ticket solutions or other things that you might be using. There are certainly other technologies out there that have certainly help our businesses along. I guess a question for either of you, if there's something that you think that is a component of, how you use dynamic ticket solutions or another piece of technology, your Square Register or something like that, that might have been something that you're really happy to have. I guess I'm personally very happy to be able to communicate directly with passengers, both who are canceled or not. And I can quickly pull all that and mass broadcast messages accordingly, which I think is super helpful because it's not a lot of people here at the ticket office to handle, hundreds or thousands of people that have reservations. Either you want to?
Yeah, I can sort of weigh in on that. I mean, obviously, we're working with Mike on a couple of initiatives, and we're in the middle of implementing a CRM to consolidate all the bits and pieces of data that we've got regarding our riders and our guests to make sure that we can communicate with them going forward. So, Mike's been helping us sort of consolidate the data from Troy Research and other email platforms and so forth. That'll really make our marketing more effective and efficient, and helping us use the best dollars as possible. We're also pursuing different sales channel partnerships through third parties that may make sense without driving too much cannibalization to our own sales effort. And Mike has been sort of standing beside us as we pursue those conversations. The Cumbres and Toltec has really stood on their own in driving their own ridership historically. And given the capacity opportunities I think we have, we'll have the opportunity to invite others to help introduce new guests and riders to the experience. So that's something that we're excited about. As we started a few months ago, we'll continue those discussions. Some of those are happening and solidifying as we speak, and we'll sort of review them as they come up and pursue them as we become aware of them.
Excellent, thank you. Nathaniel, anything technology-wise that you're excited about?
Well, I don't know if I'd say I'm excited about it, but and I'm going to watch Mike's expression as I say this because he helped us on something that he warned us about, and he was right about the warning. But we've instituted a reserve seat module, and I'm going to watch Mike's face because it's been a tremendous amount of work for Mike and DTS, and they've been wonderful and wonderfully patient with us as we often require in instituting it. But that ability for our passengers to be able to choose their seat and also see where other people are sitting has been a major portion, a major piece of our COVID response for our passengers. In fact, on the reviews that we see online, a number of them have even called that out, that they felt more comfortable choosing to ride our train because they could see how many other people were going to be around them and exactly where they were going to be. The impact of that, the negative side of that, has been that they choose to sit in such a way that unless you're going to take the great big overarching hand and move them to a different location, they all spread out so that you end up with 20 seats available on your train, but it's one here, one there, one there, one there, and so any groups of 2 or more persons can't sit together. So it has its pluses and minuses, but it really has been very useful for us at this time. I think the ability to do a broadcast message by excursion has been helpful, and I suspect it will be very helpful over the course of the next 24 hours for for us as we're updating passengers who no doubt watch the news and feel as though that they've got to find out whether or not their train is running or not. So the ability to communicate with them, and also the ability to process refunds, transfers, gift certificates, all of those things, that is just incredible. And you couldn't do that with any, without those as part of the ticketing platform. This would be an impossible enterprise to manage. Gift certificates are a critical piece of our sales going forward. And in fact, for the no doubt increasing number of otherwise would be refunds that we'd be processing, the transfers into the morphing of those into gift certificates will be important for our bottom line. So,
sure. That's actually a really good transition here to kind of my next question that I can turn over to Mike, is that we're all kind of using dynamic ticket solutions or our other point of sale systems, ticketing systems and things, almost kind of in a backwards way than they normally would be used, and discovering all kinds of different ways to be refunding or crediting or things like that. So I'll turn it over here to Mike, just as far as you've been dealing all kinds of weird curveballs through this year.
Yeah, I would say it's been interesting since this actually hit, because everybody's business rules are changing, and we need to be able to pivot and adapt just like our customers do as well. So I think everybody's in the same boat. Well, what else can we do that's going to be able to fit within these guidelines, or how can we pivot to be able to continue to make our business afloat? And kind of like, the whole reason why you and I decided to do this to start with is just get people talking so that they get some ideas as to what they might be able to do.
For sure. I mean, I know that when I first started doing this job 10 years ago, I, like many railroads that you worked with, because I know we've had this conversation many times, most of our policies were sales are final and you can never have your money back no matter what. And we all know with TripAdvisor and things like that, that has been an evolving thing.
Right.
And then, of course, when it comes to COVID world, obviously we all had to reevaluate what our sales policy was and is going to be for the year. Certainly been a challenging year, and these kinds of conversations, I think, keep our industry on track. And I really want to thank both of you, Eric and Nathan, for coming here. In the last 30 seconds, any closing remarks, anything you would like to talk about, as we go forward into the new year?
Well, I mean, I'll go. Well, first, I just wanted to thank you guys for having me on today. It's nice to meet you. It's nice to sort of get out into the community. I equally want to really thank, the supporters of the Cumbres and Toltec, the communities that we reside in, the teams that support the organization, and certainly, thanks again for having us on. Anytime we get a chance to talk to peers, it's really helpful for everybody. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And Nathaniel?
Well, again, I'd reiterate Eric's thanks to both you, Mike and Josh. And I think it's been a challenging year for all of us, and we're looking forward to 2021. At the hands of COVID, 2020 has been a year of isolation and fear and concern about the future. And it's been just a generally sad year in lots of ways. And it's been a year that causes us to want to look ahead and also look to the past about the things that we didn't know yet. And sometimes we think we didn't know how good we had it until we didn't have it that way anymore. Mm-hmm. The kind of enterprises that we all run underscore the value of togetherness, the value of understanding the past as a way of informing the future, that we've lived through things as a society that were worse than this, and we've gotten through it. Tourist railroads aren't just about trains, it's also a celebration of the past and an investment in the future and in quality of life. And so the enterprises that we run are very neatly tailored to serving the people who love us, and even those who don't even know we exist. And so we need to capitalize on that message as we look to fund the future and plan the kind of experiences that people are that they want to have now and may be afraid to, and we're looking to do in 2021.
Very well said. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for being here with us today. I know you certainly have some work to get back to. And I want to thank everybody here for watching with us today. Your local news is coming up next, but I'm going to turn it back over here to Mike to wrap things up.
I too want to thank you, Nathaniel and Eric, for joining us, and Josh, as always, I couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much. We hope that you found this helpful. We encourage your feedback. Our next webinar we're planning to have in January of 2021, where we'll be continuing our conversation. You'll get an email out a week or two before the webinar, so please watch your email. And please feel free to share the invitation to people that you think might be able to benefit from our conversation. Let's all stay safe and stay connected. Thank you.
Right.